Good evening and welcome to the January 28th, 2025 regular meeting of the Gaston County Board of Commissioners. My name is Chad Brown. I serve as the chairman of the board as well as the commissioner of the Riverbend Township. I would like to welcome our viewers and thank Spectrum Cable and AT&T for making it possible for our viewers and our television audience, the live streaming audience. I would like to present our Gaston County Commission beginning on my far right.
Alan Fraley, Cherryville Township.
Scott Sheehan, Gastonia Township.
Jim Bailey, South Point Township.
Good evening, Bob Hovis, Crowders Mountain Township.
Good evening, Tom Kieger, Gastonia Township.
Thank you, gentlemen. I will now ask you to please rise as Commissioner Hovis gives the invocation, along with Commissioner Bailey giving the Pledge of Allegiance.
If you will, please bow with me. Gracious Father, we're thankful for the blessings of every day. We're thankful for the life that you give to us and all the opportunities we have. Father, continue to enrich our souls and our compassion for those in Gaston County. Help us to be mindful of all that we put upon the burden of government. Father, we ask that in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The first item on the agenda tonight is proclamations, commendations, awards, and certificates. I will now ask Commissioner Kieger to proclaim month of February 2025 as Black History Month here in Gaston County.
Good evening, everyone. Whereas February is Black History Month and is recognized throughout the United States as an opportunity to celebrate the historical and present achievements and contributions made by African Americans to the economic, cultural, and political development of our great country, the state of North Carolina, and our local communities. And whereas Black History Month's early origins began in February 1926 when Negro History Week was established by Dr. Carter G. Woodson, a Harvard scholar and son of a former slave. Dr. Woodson launched an initiative to encourage the study of Black history and the African American experience in the United States. And whereas Dr. Woodson's legacy influenced the eventual shift from Negro History Week to a month-long celebration later to be established in the mid-'70s and celebrated thereafter as Black History Month. And whereas this year marks the 61st anniversary of the Civil Rights Act, which was first proposed by President John F. Kennedy in 1963 and eventually signed into law during the height of the American Civil Rights Movement on July 2nd, 1964 by President Lyndon B. Johnson. The legislation prohibited discrimination on the basis of race, color, religion, sex, or national origin and paved the way for future anti-discrimination legislation. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Gaston County Board of Commissioners, in commemoration of this nationwide celebration, hereby proclaims February 2025 as Black History Month in recognition of the many contributions of African Americans to Gaston County, North Carolina, and the nation at large, in the ongoing pursuit of equality and human rights for all citizens, and this will be adopted later in the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Kieger. The next item on the agenda is presentations. Presentation for the Gaston County 2024 statewide benchmark comparisons from the NCACC County Map Book, and that comes from Ms. Denise Canada, Director of Research and Physical Policy for NCACC. Ms. Canada.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioners, thank you so much for having me. I am from the Association of County Commissioners, and we are your association. We work for you. All 100 states, all 100 counties are members of the association, including Gaston County, and we are there to support you and your staff through research and advocacy and other efforts. So as part of our research function tonight, I will be going over a few demographic and economic highlights to give you a better sense of who it is that you're governing throughout your work. I want to start first with demographics and look at the way the population has slowly grown, or maybe not slowly, over the past 50 years. So this graph shows you from 1970 up until 2023, which is the most recent information. And it's a pretty steady slope growing upwards over that time period. And during that time, you have added almost 100,000 new residents, 92,000 new residents between 1970 and 2023. And most of those moved into municipal areas. Or more accurately, most of that growth took place in municipalities. So one thing that's a little bit of an unknown for me when I pull something like this together is if you've had any significant annexation, that would have a little bit of a shift on this as well. But the population is primarily in municipal areas. So if you go back to this slide, I want to take this same graph and then break it down and show you where that growth has taken place. So you'll see the bottom is the unincorporated areas in the darker, and the lighter green is the population change in the municipal areas. So that's where almost all of your population change has been taking place, which you probably is something you experience in your work. Also, I should say, happy to take questions at any time throughout the presentation, and also happy to take questions at the end. This is a population pyramid, and it shows the very youngest citizens on the bottom and the very oldest citizens on top, and it's basically every age stacked on top of the other to make a pyramid showing what the age distribution of your citizens and your residents are. So you can see we have men on the left and we have women on the right. So I look at a lot of these for a lot of counties, and here's what I see when I look at yours. And the first is a relatively solid base of young families. Sometimes you'll look at one of these and it just kind of goes up from the bottom when it's an area that's really losing families with young children. So you see a really nice solid base of young families. The largest groups of men, so on the left, I don't have a pointer, but on the left near the top and on the right near the top, and women, are both people in their early 50s, and overall a large retirement age population. That's something, of course, that you can see the impact of in your work, in your maybe property taxes, use of the school system. With an aging population, not 50s, but older than that, you start to see additional EMS calls, those sorts of things. So that's how this can fit into the policy decisions that you're making as you head into your budget process. And here's the same pyramid on the left, and then I've just compared you to North Carolina overall on the right. So it's pretty similar, but not completely. You can see that you have much more of that bulge up in the top near the 50s and 60s area than the state does overall, which means, again, what I just said on the prior slide, you have a bit more of a retirement age population and a large chunk of folks right in that area. Now, occasionally we will look at one of these. Sometimes I bring Pitt County for comparison. I didn't bring it tonight, but with Pitt County, what you see is you get down to that about 18 to 24-year-old range, and it just shoots way out the sides because of their university. So that's the way you can see changes in these from one county to the other. And here's your median age. What I have right here is one bar for all 100 counties in North Carolina. The county on the right has the highest median age. I believe that's Brunswick County at around age 54, something like that. It also, other places on the right also are places that tend to have a very large retirement population. So you'll see, even though you have a high percentage of retirement age folks, your median age is relatively far to the left, so relatively on the lower end of the state. And I think that that's because, like we talked about, you do have that nice solid base of young families and folks with teenage, adolescent, and all of that helps to bring down or serves to bring down the median age. So the median age of your residents is 45. That's it on demographics, and I have a few slides pulled together now about economics and your workforce. So the first slide that I have shows the education of your residents who are over age 25, and how it compares to the state overall. So you're on the right in the dark, and the state overall is on the left. What you see down at the very bottom, these are folks with less than a high school diploma. That's 12% of your population compared to 10% of the state overall. Those are really relatively pretty similar. All of these, honestly, are pretty similar to the statewide average. And then in that next, which is your largest category, are residents that have a diploma, a high school diploma, or a GED, and that's their highest level of college education. So between those two groups in the bottom, the 29 and the 12, you have about 40% of your residents who have a high school degree at most, which is something that's good to keep in mind as you work on economic development and what kinds of corporations and companies you want to recruit for jobs. It's good to know the education of your workforce. This is your unemployment rate since 1990, and there is absolutely nothing special about 1990 other than that's what I picked as the starting year, so it's not anything in particular. But I do like to give you a sense of several decades and how it's very normal and natural for the unemployment rate to go up and down over time. And what I really see when I look at this is that it's very expected because it's all in response to larger national economic events. So over on the very far left, for example, you have the savings and loan crisis from the 1990s, and you have a peak right there, and then about 2000, 2001, you have a peak in unemployment. That was the Enron and the Arthur Andersen and that whole financial meltdown. Of course, you have your highest peak around 2010, 2009, something like that from the housing bubble, and then another peak from the pandemic. So the variations that you have over time are all very natural, and they follow national events. And I've also shown the statewide unemployment rate over that same period. Yours is a little bit higher, yours is still the green, and the statewide rate is in the gray. And so you'll see that the shape is almost exactly the same, even though your rate peaks up a little bit higher in some areas. And just like the state, your unemployment rate has dropped pretty strikingly since the height of the pandemic, which is what we would expect to see. This next map shows where people who live in Gaston County work for their primary job. And I will say that there are a lot of different data sources where this can be pulled from. And I specifically pulled this from a survey product that's put out by the Census Bureau. And I just bring that up because another way this can be done is through records from the Internal Revenue Service that they make publicly available. And different data sets will show slightly different things. I pulled this from the Census Bureau, and it shows, in terms of counties, where does everyone go for, again, what we call the primary job, whatever the respondent identifies as their primary job. If you're working two jobs, like an evening job, of course, that would not be counted in here. And so what you see is that, as you would expect, not many people going all the way over to eastern North Carolina, not very many people going into most of the western North Carolina counties. And it's really the counties right around you, as you would typically expect, although it's not always the case, where most of your residents are going for their primary job, or if they're telecommuting, where their primary job is located. 31% of your residents who have a job that's in Gaston County, and they stay here in Gaston County for their employment. And that's helpful because one thing that we know is people tend to spend money where their jobs are in addition to where they live. You run out on your lunch break, you stop and do something on the way home. So it's helpful to have a nice base of folks who make Gaston County both their home and the place where they have their job. And then unsurprisingly, you have a very large chunk of folks going over into Mecklenburg County. When you're right next to one of those larger counties, that's what we would expect to see, and certainly what we see in the counties that surround Wake County as well. So that's not unusual. This graph is a little bit similar to what I showed you earlier in that there are 100 bars here. There's one for every single county in North Carolina. And what I have shown is the change in employment between 1990 and 2023. So over that 30-plus year period. And then each bar goes up to the percentage or down, in the case of some counties, down for the percentage change. You, on the very far right, have Currituck County, where I actually had to draw an arrow, which I don't think you can probably read from where you are, just shooting up, because they were sending the graph scale really far out of proportion with a 296% increase in jobs, but that is not typical, so do not worry that you are not there. You are probably, you can barely even see it, but you are where I have drawn the arrow. You have a decrease in total number of jobs in the private sector of about 6%. Now, I haven't shown it on here, but it's important to keep in mind that it's just the private sector. So government employment has likely grown during this period. In fact, I looked at it, government employment has grown during this period. That's one thing that does not show up in these numbers, but that has helped to keep your unemployment rate down. And so where are these jobs? You have, as most places do, a decline over that same time period in what we call goods producing jobs. Manufacturing ultimately is what that's getting at. And then an increase in the share of jobs that are what we call service providing. So it's things you would typically think of, such as hospitality work, restaurants, lodging, those sorts of things. But it's also white collar services like banking, health, that sort of thing. Any kind of service provision at all would fall into that upper service providing jobs. And almost every county in North Carolina over this time period, and honestly, every county in the nation almost, has this same shift in that service jobs are just making up a larger share of our economy overall. You've heard that many times, and it's true in your numbers as well. And then those manufacturing jobs, somewhat of a decline. It is true that we have a few counties in North Carolina that have had an increase in manufacturing during that time period, but those really are the minority, and what you have in Gaston County is much more typical. This graph shows the per capita income of your residents. So again, per capita on an individual basis for every single resident in the county, basically all of the income earned in the county divided by the number of residents in the county. And I'm just harping on that a little bit to point out that it is a different measure than median household income. There are a lot of different measures that you can use to try to get a sense of your economy and the economic health of your residents. And no one indicator is right, and no one indicator is the best, and no one indicator paints the full picture. And that's why I made a point to say at the beginning, these are some highlights, but you really need to look at several indicators to get a broad sense. I also bring up median household income and point out that this is not it, because median household income, I believe, is one of the factors that's used by Commerce in the tier calculations. So that's sometimes a question I get. This is not the same number I saw with the tiers. It's not. All of that said, the dark green is Gaston County, and then above that I've drawn in sort of a cranberry color the statewide average. These numbers are adjusted for inflation over time. So with that said, I see a few things. One is I see that the per capita income has gone up over time, even adjusted for inflation. So folks overall are a bit better off than they were at the beginning of the graph back in the 1990s. That's one thing that stands out. And the second thing that stands out, though, is that the gap between the statewide average and Gaston County has increased a bit, but it really looks like that happened at about 2010, maybe even 2015, and has not narrowed since then, but also doesn't seem to be growing. So your per capita income is lower than the statewide average. One thing to keep in mind is that your cost of living may or may not be lower than the statewide average. So there's just a lot to keep in mind, and no one indicator paints the whole picture. This shows county gross domestic product. Again, like I've said, one bar for all 100 counties. You may not have heard much about county gross domestic product or seen this before, because although the federal government has collected county-level gross domestic product for a long time. They only first released that data right about 2020, and you might remember we were all tied up with a few other things in 2020. So I don't think that the county-level GDP has gotten very much attention at all, but I think it's an interesting data set and something that I always try to pull out for the counties that I speak to. And what I've shown here is a 5-year change in your gross domestic product. And so what am I talking about? What is gross domestic product? It's the value of what your economy produces. If your entire economy were just one factory, this would be very easy to measure, because it would be, what's the value of what that factory produces? It's a little bit harder to conceptualize when so much of your economy is service-based, but it's the same concept at the end. What's being produced here, either as a good or produced in more of a service sense, and what's the value of all of that? And that is increasing, and increased by 9% over this time period. So you're certainly up in the top, I would say maybe third of counties, and that's really quite a solid increase. The median county over that time increased by 6%. So you're ahead of, again, you're ahead of most counties in that increase. This last chart shows the makeup of that GDP that we just talked about. So what are the things that are contributing to your GDP overall? What is being produced in your economy? What's the value coming from in the Gaston County economy? And the very bottom, I have these ranked top to bottom, or bottom to top, with the largest at the bottom. Finance, insurance, real estate, so those sort of financial types of jobs. And then second is manufacturing, which is why you still did have that nice solid part of your jobs coming from manufacturing, even though those have declined over time. You can read the slides, so I'm not going to read you through all the different parts, but I do like to provide the breakdown to help you get a sense of what all is happening across your economy. And the last set of slides that I have prepared for you are about sales tax. And I believe that you went over some sales tax data at a prior meeting or possibly at a board retreat, something like that. But I wanted to pull a few things together because it's something that I get a lot of questions about. This graph, with all of the very, very ups and downs and volatile changes, is an extremely typical graph for sales tax, because sales tax is a very volatile revenue source, particularly in North Carolina. What you're looking at right here is what I've graphed is the change from one year to the next in the same month. So in January, how did we compare to last January? In February, how did we compare to last February? Like that. And so what you can see where I've circled April 2021, which is the peak on this graph, was 31% higher than April 2020. And especially if you are newer on the commission and maybe have not paid attention to sales tax as long, you have been seeing numbers like this for a few years. But I want to point out very emphatically that that is not normal at all in terms of historical sales tax growth trends. The economy, as you know, did some very interesting things during the pandemic period especially, and there are a few reasons for that. There was a Supreme Court decision in 2018 that you might be familiar with that changed the way online sales are taxed, or at least how those taxes are remitted. And that Supreme Court decision happening before the pandemic, when so much shopping shifted to happening online, those were really just extremely well timed to benefit North Carolina counties and counties in other states as well. But this is not typical and not something that I would expect you to continue to see in prior years, which I'm sure you've heard from your finance staff as well. But also, one more thing I would say here is that forecasting sales tax revenue is extremely difficult, and it is probably the most difficult sales revenue source to forecast, which is unfortunate because it's your second largest revenue source, as it is in every county, but it's just very, very difficult to forecast it correctly. This chart starts in fiscal 2020, actually halfway through fiscal 19, and goes over about a 5-year period to show you what your trend has been overall in sales tax collections. So now what I'm showing is the collections from month to month. And by collections, what I mean is sales that took place within Gaston County and what sales tax were collected on the sales that took place here. You might know that's completely different than how sales tax is distributed and given back to you, but I like to look at collections first because it gives a better sense of what is happening here. And what you can see is your sales tax collections went up at a nice level over that 5-year period, which is very helpful from a revenue perspective. But those last few months really do start to go down. And so when you do this same graph and just do I believe I did the last 24 months on this graph, what you see is that when you add in, call it a trend line, but basically when you just draw a line to see what's happening, you can see that that line is almost flat. So the growth that you were having up until this point is really, at this point, no longer happening. I certainly talked to many counties where the line here is headed back downhill. Certainly some counties are seeing a decrease month over month or year over year, and you're mostly not in that situation. But this is just not uncommon at all as we come out of the COVID economy and into a more normal economy. This is very typical, but it also has real implications for your budget process. The last thing I want to talk about has to do with sales tax distribution. So for those of you that are fortunate enough to not know much about it, the way local sales tax works in North Carolina is that every county levies its own sales taxes. All of the money is collected by retailers and sent into the state. And then the state applies a series of mathematical formulas that are laid out in statute, about which the Department of Revenue has no control. And those formulas determine how much money gets sent back to every individual county. And so even if every single county collected the exact same amount of sales tax revenue, the exact same amount of sales took place in every county, obviously hypothetical, no two counties would end up receiving back the same amount of sales tax revenue. And that's one reason that sales tax is very difficult to forecast, because even if you knew what was happening in your own economy, that doesn't directly translate to being able to forecast an increase or decrease in sales tax revenue. So I have an example, and this is the last thing that I'll cover, and then happy to take any questions. I looked back at October 2024 collections, which are sales that took place in September 2024, and the closest county that I could find to Gaston County this particular month was Onslow County. So in Gaston County, there was $7.24 million of sales tax collected from sales that took place, and Onslow County was $7.26 million. So about $28,000 different on an over $7 million number. These two counties were very, very close, and so this was a good peer to compare you against. And what you see when you go through the actual distribution is that each of the lines I've shown in this table is a portion or a part of the formula of what you end up receiving back. And if you go down just to the bottom, what you can see is that you received back in this month $7.9 million in sales tax revenue. This is before the split out to your towns, I should say. The Gaston County share was $7.9 million, and the Onslow County share was $7.5 million. So there are a few things to notice, and the first thing that I notice is that both of these counties received back more in sales tax revenue than was actually collected in the county. And what that means is that you're a recipient county, and you are receiving some sales tax that's coming from sales in other counties. There are other counties out there who receive back less than is collected in their county. And where did it go? Well, part of it came here. Again, because of the distribution formulas that have been put in place over time. I'm happy to walk through the individual parts of this if that would be helpful, but I will say you can't control any of it. So I don't know that it's really from a policy-making perspective necessarily useful to go over, but I wanted you to have the level of detail in case you want to do a comparison on your own later and see how the differences are shaking out. And then, of course, again, after these numbers comes the split out to the towns. I think that might be it, commissioners. It was sort of a fast and furious race through your economy and your demographics. I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions from the board at this time? Mr.
I'll
Keegan.
make a comment. Thank you for coming back. Are you having to drive back tonight?
I'm going to stay overnight and go back in the
Okay.
morning.
I just wanted to point out something that I noticed. I think it was slide 6. It was just the population. You don't need to go to it.
Okay.
But, where the municipalities have outgrown
Yes.
the rural areas by
Yes.
a great amount. But as soon as I saw that, I think of towns in our, or cities, municipalities in our county that go out and annex
Exactly,
and
yes.
put in 1,000
Yes.
homes or 800 homes, and that's very prominent in Gaston County over recent years. They could be 5 miles from a city line, but they
Yep.
go out, the owner wants to sell it, to develop it, but I just wanted to throw that out there.
Yep, no, you're right, definitely. That happens more in some counties than others, but it is a variable in that, and that can cause those numbers to look more out of sorts than they would otherwise. Those
Okay.
kinds of changes, yep.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you, ma'am, for your time tonight, and have a safe trip back tomorrow.
Thanks, thank you so much for having me. If you come up with questions after the fact, the association is here to support you in your work.
Thank you very much. The next item is the county commission will now take citizens' comments on public hearing. Am I missing a page, Donna? I got it. The county commission will now take citizens' comments on 2 public hearings. Comments will be taken on the following issues: zoning map change REZ-196 and zoning map change REZ-199. Before I begin the procedures tonight, let me outline the rules of the hearing. Citizens wishing to make comment will be recognized by the chair and then requested to step to the microphone for their comments. Citizens will state their name and address for the record. Comments are limited to 3 minutes tonight. All questions shall be directed to the chair in response. The chair shall rule on all points of order. Do I hear a motion to go into public hearing? Motion made by Commissioner Hovis, seconded by Commissioner Bailey. All in favor? It is unanimous, Madam Clerk. The county commission will now take citizens' comments on public hearing, zoning map change, REZ 196, Stephen and Ruth Abbott, the applicants. Ms. Jamie Kimberlew, the Director of Planning and Zoning, Building and Development Services, will provide a brief overview. Once she has completed her comments, citizens' comments will be taken. Ms. Kimberlew.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. REZ-24-10-21-00-196 is a general rezoning request for parcels 314245 and 314246, located off of Shalom Drive in Dallas. The applicants and property owners are Stephen and Ruth Abbott, and they are requesting to rezone 2 one-acre parcels from the R1 Single Family Limited Zoning District to the R3 Single Family General Zoning District. The subject parcel is located between Dallas and Stanley city limits, just off of Kaiser Dairy Road. The orthophoto shows that the original parcel shows the original parcel and that it currently consists of fields, wooded areas, and agricultural structures. The surrounding area is heavily residential as well, with a mix of housing types and styles throughout the area. The property owners purchased this property a little over a year ago, and last fall they subdivided the property through the family exemption process to create 2 one-acre lots for their children. This rezoning request is for these 2 lots only, shown as lots 3 and 4 on the approved plat shown, while the original or the main parcel will remain R1 Single Family Limited zoning. Please note that when the applicants initially applied for this request, the new parcel IDs had not yet been assigned to the new lots, so the original request was to rezone a portion of the main parcel. Since the new parcels have been mapped and new IDs have been assigned, the parcel numbers have been updated in this rezoning request. The zoning map shows that the subject parcel and surrounding parcels are zoned R1 Single Family Limited with some RMF or residential multifamily zoned lots to the south of the subject parcels. Because this is a general rezoning request, if approved, any uses allowed in the R3 Single Family General Zoning District would be permitted in accordance with the standards and regulations as adopted in our UDO. This map shows who all received notices for tonight's public hearing. Notices were mailed out and a sign was placed on the site on January 13th in accordance with general statutes. A neighbor of the site did come to the office yesterday to inquire about the case and share that he noticed trailers and a manufactured home being brought onto the site. The neighbor also stated that they did not have objections to the rezoning of the property or the property owners trying to place homes on the site for their children. Our staff did do a site visit earlier today and noticed that there is a manufactured home on a trailer still, so not on the site, and we did see some horse trailers as well. This table shows the property owner's information for the mailed notices, all pulled from our tax records. The site is served by a private well and septic system and is accessed off of Shalom Drive, which is a private drive. Shalom Drive is off of Kaiser Dairy Road, which is an NCDOT maintained road. The two lots that are requested to be rezoned have access to Shalom via a 20-foot access easement. This property is located in Area 2, North 321 Gaston, North Central Gaston of the Comprehensive Land Use Plan. The key issues for the citizens in this area include the preservation of open space, road improvements and better connectivity to other areas of the county and throughout the region, more transportation alternatives, the preservation of agricultural, and maintaining the rural feel of the area. The future land use designation is rural. This designation exemplifies Gaston County and the existing natural resources that exist throughout the area. Residential homes tend to be located on larger lots and are set back from the roads that they front on. It is understood that this is the default use designation for Gaston County. The Gaston County TRC reviewed the request on Wednesday, December 4th, and a letter from the GCL MPO was provided and included in your staff packet. There are no planned or funded transportation improvement projects within the immediate vicinity of this property. Staff also found that the request is consistent with the goals of the Comprehensive Land Use Plan. The Planning Board heard this request at its January 6th regular meeting and recommended approval by a unanimous 7-0 vote based on the fact that it is a reasonable request and in the public interest, and it is consistent with the goals of the Comprehensive Land Use Plan, as it will keep the parcel residential in nature and maintain the rural feel of the area as envisioned by the Small Area Plan. Mr. Chairman, this concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions. We also have the applicants here as well.
Thank you, ma'am. Are there any comments from the applicant at this time that wish to speak? Please step to the podium, ma'am.
Good evening. My name is Ruth Abbott. My husband and I, Steve Abbott, purchased the property a little over a year ago, as stated. What we desire to do with these two parcels that we're asking for rezoning is to only allow our children to be able to live on the property and have the option to put a pre-manufactured home or a stick-built home. There is currently a pre-manufactured home on the property, but there is no electricity to it. There is no dwelling there at all, just the property. So we would desire to move that and live in it while our home is being built and turn it over to our daughter, who is disabled, to live in after our home is built. And then our son, who's retired military, desires to put a home on the other lot. Other than that, the rest of the acreage would be for our personal home and to remain as farm and rural land. No desire to put any other mobile homes or buildings out there as far as turning it into a mobile home park or anything like that. We desire to keep it as agricultural and farmland. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. I tell your son thank you for his service. Any citizens wishing to comment on this at this time? Seeing none, any questions from the Board of Commissioners? Seeing none as well, if there are no additional comments, I will declare the public hearing closed. Just to recap, the Planning Board recommended approval of 7-0. Is there a motion on the floor to approve this? Motion made by Commissioner Hovis, seconded by, who was that? Commissioner Fraley. Any discussion? All in favor? It is unanimous, Madam Clerk. Mr. Goldberg, if you'll please provide a consistency statement to the clerk, please, sir.
Yes, sir.
Good job. The County Commission will now take citizens' comments, public hearing, zoning map change, REZ 199, William Layton. Ms. Jamie Caberlu, the Director of Planning and Zoning, Building and Development Service, will provide a brief overview. Once she has completed her comments, citizens' comments will be taken. Ms. Caberlu.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. REZ-24-11-11-00199 is a general rezoning request for parcel ID 212823, located at 111 Camp Rotary Road in Gastonia. The applicant is William Layton, and the property owners are Stephen and Maria Mason. The request is to rezone the .30 acre parcel from the R1 Single Family Limited Zoning District with a U.S. Urban Standards overlay to the C1 Light Commercial with U.S. Urban Standards overlay. The subject property is in a residential area of the southwest region of the county and just outside of the city limits of Gastonia, near Kings Mountain and Bessemer City. The orthophoto shows the area is primarily residential with various commercial pockets throughout. The uses within the vicinity include a camp, a warehouse, Crowder's Mountain State Park, and many residential homes. Currently, our tax records indicate that the subject parcel is a church. Tax records also indicate that the building was constructed in 1964. The current owners purchased the property in November of 2023. The zoning map shows that the area is zoned R1 with a US overlay. The areas in white are within the city of Gastonia's zoning jurisdiction. Please note that the default zoning district for the county was R1, and this site has housed a commercial structure since 1964, which is before zoning was established in the county in 1992. This map shows who all received mailed notices for tonight's public hearing. Notices were mailed out and a sign was placed on the property on January 13th, all in accordance with general statutes. Staff received one call about the request for a general inquiry, and no concerns were raised. This table shows the property owner's information for the mailed notices on the previous slide. The site is served with public water and by a private septic system and is accessed off Camp Rotary Road, which is an NCDOT-owned and maintained road. The property is located in Area 5, which is the scenic Gaston, Southwest Gaston area of the Comprehensive Land Use Plan. Key issues for citizens in the area include preservation of open space, road improvements, and better connectivity, preservation of existing conditions while allowing low to moderate growth, and repurposing vacant buildings and facilities for new economic opportunities. The future land use designation is rural, which was the default future use designation for Gaston County. Staff does find that the request is consistent with the Comprehensive Land Use Plan, and the Gaston County TRC reviewed the request on Wednesday, December 4th, and shared the following comments. The Environmental Health Department stated that this would trigger a change of use and recommended that the applicants apply for an existing system approval or an ESA permit during the change of use permitting process. The GCL MPO also provided their standard letter, which is attached in your staff packet, and they stated that there are no funded transportation projects within the immediate vicinity of this site. The Planning Board also heard this request at its January 6th regular meeting and recommended approval by a unanimous 7-0 vote based on the fact that the case is a reasonable request and in the public interest, and it is consistent with the goals of the Comprehensive Land Use Plan and will repurpose a vacant building and facility for new economic opportunities as envisioned by the Small Area Plan. Mr. Chairman, this concludes my presentation.
Thank you, ma'am. Are there any comments from the applicant at this time wish to speak? Yes, sir, please step up.
First, I'd like to say thank you for allowing me to speak on behalf of Crowder's Mountain Trading Post. My name is William Layton. Each of you know that I wanted to let you know that prior to the purchase of the property, there was a lot of research conducted, not only on the property, but on the Crowder's Mountain community. Based on what I found, I knew that my vision had to be more than just another convenience store. I wanted a place of business that was community-based, offered resources consistent with that, and represented the people and the visitors to Crowder's Mountain area. While Crowder's Mountain Trading Post, the community and the surrounding area are rich with history, and I wanted to capture the very heart of that feeling. I learned that prior to the arrival of the European settlers, specifically Scotch-Irish peoples, much of the land was natural prairie and grazed by herds of buffalo. The peaks marked the boundaries between the hunting lands and the Catawba Cherokee Indians, and major of the trading routes of the Cherokee crossed Crowder's Mountain. As the Scotch-Irish people settled in, they began to rely on the Native Americans for trading and began crossing through the Crowder's Mountain to establish trading with other settlers elsewhere, hence the Crowder's Mountain Trading Post. Thank you.
That address, sir, 15101, is that the correct one for you?
I'm sorry?
Their address, 15101 for you?
It's 111 Camp Rotary.
Do you have that, Donna? Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Any citizens wishing to make comment at this time on this? Seeing none, any questions from the Board of Commissioners? Seeing none as well, I now proclaim the public hearing closed. Just to recap, the Planning Board recommended 7-0 for approval of this. Do I have a motion to approve this as?
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Motion made by Commissioner Hovis, seconded by Commissioner Bailey. Any discussion? All in favor? It is unanimous, Madam Clerk. Mr. Goldberg, if you please provide a consistency statement to the clerk.
Yes, sir.
This concludes tonight's public hearing. We will move to the next item on the agenda. Approval of the business agenda. Are there any revisions or any business agenda items that need to be pulled at this time? I do have a revision. Staff has requested that we withdraw item M. They're still working on the line item as we brought back to a later date. This is for DHHS Social Services Access Approval of the Grants and Financial Management Policies and Procedures. Hard to read with all this scribbling on it. Do I hear a motion to approve the business agenda with the items M for revision?
Motion.
Motion made by Commissioner Hovis, seconded by Commissioner Sheehan. Any discussion? All in favor? It is unanimous, Madam Clerk. Thank you. Approval of the consent agenda. Do I hear a motion to approve the consent agenda with item M being revised? Motion made by Commissioner Fraley, seconded by Commissioner Sheehan. Any discussion? All in favor? That is approved, Madam Clerk. I want to point out the Gaston County proclamation for the week of January 20th through the 26th that was adopted under tonight's consent agenda was the Community Risk Reduction Proclamation will be forwarded to the Emergency Management Department. Also, the board has voted tonight to reschedule our February 11th work session to precede the February 25th regular meeting at 6 p.m. here in the Harley B. Gaston. Do I hear a motion to approve the legislative agenda for the 2025 session for the North Carolina General Assembly? Motion made by Commissioner Hovis, seconded by Commissioner Fraley. Any discussion? All in favor? That is unanimous as well, Madam Clerk. No items were pulled from the agenda. Appointments. It'll be a long night here. Commissioner Fraley. Mr. Sheehan.
Got reappointment requests, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Edwin G. Springs to the Gaston County Board of Adjustment, Mr. Stephen Crane to the Planning Board, Ms. Elizabeth Utick to Tourism Development Advisory Board.
Seconded by Commissioner Fraley. All in favor? It is unanimous, Madam Clerk. Commissioner Bailey. Yes, sir, please.
All right, I would just actually, I would like to thank a lot of the people that had put in for some of these boards. I'm new at this, so one of the things that I have had to do, especially when we have more than one person put in for these boards, is try to find out the best person for the board. And I think it's admirable of anybody that's wanting to sit on a board for the county and help the improvement of this county. So over the past 3 or 4 days, I've probably been on the phone for almost a day, talking to individuals, probably anywhere from 12 to 15 people on some of these members. And I would just like to thank them. I would, Mr. Chairman, like to just delay the Gaston County Board of Adjustments. I'd like to delay it till next month.
Okay.
Still do a little bit more research on that one. But I do have 3 others. The Animal Care and Enforcement Advisory, Mr. David Holcomb. The Gaston County Fire Commission, which would be Randall Rowland. And Local Emergency Planning Committee, Randy Gant.
Seconded by Commissioner Hovis. Any discussion? All in favor? It is unanimous, Madam Clerk. Commissioner Hovis.
I have none, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Kieger.
Reappoint Cameron Loftus to the Animal Care Enforcement Advisory Board. And, to the County Housing Board, the appointment of Melissa Huffman.
Seconded by Commissioner Hovis. Any discussion? All in favor? It is unanimous, Madam Clerk. I don't have any. Also want to say we do have plenty of boards that are vacant. If anybody is looking to submit any of those, some of those would give you examples of adult home care, historic preservation, nursing home community advisory committee, transportation advisory board, just to say a few. But I do have a few full board, Health and Human Services. Commissioner Kieger requested to be appointed. I'm going to come off of that board. Is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Hovis. Any discussion? All in favor? Congratulations, Mr. Kieger. The second one is going to be the Quality of Natural Resources. Dr. Michael McLeod, reappointment requested, and that will go for the water conservation side representing. Seconded by Commissioner Hovis. All in favor? It is unanimous, Madam Clerk. Kings Mountain Board of Adjustments for an ETJ appointment for Miss Edie Bergstrom was appointing for reappointment. I will, is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Kieger. I will go ahead, and since there's discussion, I will go ahead and say I'm not going to vote for any ETJ appointments because I think that goes, like we've talked about in the past, with kind of representation that's not withheld for what the voting prowess would be, since they do have, the City of Kings Mountain kind of holds that bond over them, so it's kind of taxation without representation, the way I look at that. So I will not be voting for that. With that, any other discussion? All in favor? That is 1, 2, 3, 4, 4-2, Madam Clerk. Also, JCPC, Tom Kieger would like to be appointed to that. Seconded by Commissioner Hovis. Any discussion? All in favor? Commissioner Kieger stepping up tonight. Thank you, sir. All right. Items pulled. Appointments. Reports. Commissioner Fraley.
None, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Sheehan.
None, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Bailey. Mr. Hovis.
I have none, sir.
Mr. Kieger.
I'll be very brief. I just want to point out at the last College Board meeting, I won't get into the business, but on a proud note again, I think this is their third season. Preseason, both the men's baseball and the ladies softball are ranked in the top 10 nationally preseason. And I did attend the Martin Luther King celebration at our DSS auditorium, which was a packed house. And, well, I'll wait till other matters. That's it.
Madam Clerk, if you don't mind, I'd like to go back to the vacant appointment for my chair appointment, Farmers Market Advisory Board, putting Commissioner Hovis on that one.
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Kieger. All in favor? It is unanimous, Madam Clerk. Just to go back to that, I'm not going to have a report tonight because I think we're going to have a long night with Mr. David, but County Manager's report.
I hope not.
Not to extend that, but I just want to make a quick comment. As most of you guys are aware, there's been a lot of discussion about what the county has not done or is not doing in relation to homelessness since the Salvation Army has closed. And normally I would not respond to that, but I think in not doing so diminishes the hard work, dedication, and partnerships of this community. And so just a really quick update on what has happened since then. So the county has a successful partnership with the First United Methodist Church in Gastonia to provide a true warming shelter facility for the unhoused population in Gaston County. Our departments have stepped up. They've volunteered their time, their energy, their efforts, and the First United Methodist Church has stepped up, and we're grateful to them. Other agencies that have stepped up is Health Net Gaston, Continuum of Care, United Way, as well as the city in partnering with us on sharing costs for law enforcement, coverage there to provide background checks, janitorial services, and our community paramedic program has visited that site twice nightly to check in and provide wraparound services, and our employees are volunteering there as well. The faith community continues to step up as well and provide food, essential services, blankets, and sleeping bags, as well as volunteers. And I think one piece of this that's really important is that when this was done at the Salvation Army last year, we had an average of about 10 folks there nightly. And since this new partnership has came about, we have around 50 folks nightly at the First United Methodist Church. So this is just a true testament to the collaboration of this community and what we've been able to accomplish as we've came together. And so I just wanted to highlight that.
Well, you took away my other matters I was going to bring up, but we'll go ahead and discuss it now since it has been brought up. I want to thank Steve, Vincent, and you guys for working hard to get that going since we didn't have anything. And Matt, your leadership has been impeccable. Mark for providing the cots on a basis of a call in the middle of the night saying they needed more cots, and you guys stepped up. I kind of find it disheartening for some of the things that has been spoken about this county and what we've done to step up in order to make sure that the homeless population is accredited and accounted for. Obviously, we've had disasters that have happened this week. You know, we've had a building burned down and such. We've had different areas that we've had to go and do cleanup in. And it also takes resources away from the things that we're doing. So, Mark, your staff, Robbie, you and Anderson, and the things that you're doing from the county police, the sheriff's office, Scott, you guys, it takes a lot. And I was taken aback when I got to see some of the comments that were made and the requests that were made about the county not stepping up. I dare say anybody in this county has not stepped up the way that our government has, not just from this board, but from our staff employees, and also the many volunteers that come from our community just to go out and staff this. It does take a lot. The police officers who volunteer, I think we offered extra pay one time when the snow came the last time in order to extend the shelter time to get into the morning time when it was going to be bad. So for those people who want to go out and take that piece of ink and the paper and they want to make their comments, I dare them to come in here and stand before this board and say something that we're not stepping up for this community. I think the number was over, it was over 2 million that this board has stepped up and made sure that this community does not suffer. And I'm tired of anybody who wants to come in here and blame this community at base for what this community, that our county does for what we do in government to help people. We take pride in it. I know Steve and Vincent have worked their tail off to be able to find something different outside of sleeping on a piece of concrete. So when somebody wants to come in and they want to take a pastor's knowledge to come and go between this board and say something in the paper, I say come and stand before that dais and come say it to us now. Because we step up in this community. Our community cares about what's happening. We can't take care of everybody, but we try to do the things we can. And for some pastor to sit there and want to put the blame on us, I tell him to come step before us and see what he would like to say. County Attorney's report.
Yes, sir. We do have need for a brief closed session, and I asked that the commission, the board, vote to go into closed session pursuant to NC General Statute 143-318.11A, paragraphs 1, 3, and 6.
Thank you. Take a motion to go into closed session. Motion made by Commissioner Hovis, seconded by Commissioner Kieger. Any discussion?
Yeah, I had another matter I wanted to mention real quick.
Okay.
I just wanted to ask the manager, it may be premature, and I know a federal judge has stopped the president's pause of federal grants and other programs. If that gets reinstated, that's going to have some kind of effect on the grants that we are receiving. We don't know to what extent yet?
Yeah, so we've been researching, and Scott and our grants department have been researching that today, as well as David, on what the true impact would be or is to Gaston County. And there will be some. We're not entirely sure of the magnitude of that yet because we're still in the early stages, but that will be something that we would update you guys on once we get to the bottom of that.
Have a motion to go into closed sessions. First, motion made by Commissioner Hovis, seconded by Commissioner Kieger. Any discussion? All in favor? We are now in closed session. Back in open session. Mr. County Attorney, please, Mr. Goldberg.
Yes, sir. I do recommend stating that during the closed session, the board did vote to approve 2 pre-litigation employee settlement agreements.
Thank you, sir. Any other matters need to come before this board? Seeing none, this concludes tonight's script. Our meeting for tonight, our combined work session, regular meeting is February 25th, 6 p.m. here in the Harley B. Gaston Public Forum. Also, County Commissioner will schedule a special meeting for February 11th to conduct a budget strategy session from 10 a.m. to 2. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions, please remit those to Donna S. Buff at 704-866-3196. Good night, Buffalo Bills.